I'm Mino Giunta with the Austin Parks and Rec Department here at the Elisabet Ney Museum. We last did a tour back in November, and now it's late February and we just came out of a big snowstorm, of all things, so I wanted to do another tour here getting ready for Ney Nature Day. So last week it got down to about 10 degrees and we got almost 5 inches of snow here in this part of Austin. And that's a bit unusual, but here in the restored area of the Ney landscape, I'm hopeful that that won't really damage too many of these plants, and so maybe I can talk a little bit about why. A lot of these plants have ranges, places where they grow, that go well beyond Central Texas. And even in Central Texas history, freezes like that aren't necessarily common, but they do happen. So a lot of plants that grow here can take that kind of thing. So while you might see sort of melting cactus or agave around town this week after the snowstorm, those are probably not plants that would have been here a couple hundred years ago. And here in the restoration area, what's unique is that these are almost entirely plants that would have been here a couple hundred years ago. So that's pretty cool. So one of the things I was curious about as the snow started to melt was seeing how the plants that had been buried underneath were doing. And I've seen that a lot of our wildflowers, which often grow during the wintertime and then bloom during the spring, seem just fine. So here's an example of that. This is cutleaf daisy, also called Engelmann daisy, and it'll put up its blooms in a couple months on sort of taller stalks, and it seems like it's doing just fine. So that's nice to see. So this is a little cluster of little bluestem, which we talked about in the fall tour. And again, this is a plant, it's dormant right now. These are last year's stalks, seed stalks that are up, but it's a plant that's not gonna mind the freeze at all. This grows much farther north up into the plains, and it's still alive below ground, and in the spring, pretty soon here, it'll start sending up fresh leaves. Here's one more plant that we can see survive the freeze. Looking a little worse for wear, but this is giant spiderwort, which I always think of as one of our, sort of the signs of spring. It's one of the first ones to bloom, and really in late winter along with the redbuds. And got a little nipped on the ends, but I bet it'll still bloom here in just a few weeks. So hopefully now that I've eased your fears a little bit about the hard freeze last week, I wanted to talk a little more generally than we have before about the landscape here. And Austin's an interesting place to be because there's such a mosaic of different ecoregions sort of all touching here in Austin. And a lot of what determines that is the soil and the topography. So here behind me is this restored meadow, and it's these old post oak trees, starting to look a little bit like a post oak savanna, which is one of our local ecoregions. And yeah, maybe we can look a little bit more at why that is. One of the things I like to pay attention to when I'm walking around a landscape is how the plants around me are changing, and what that might tell me about the soil and the conditions here, and also what plants would want to grow here. So here in this restored area on the south side of Waller Creek, we're under these old post oak and live oak trees, and we have this meadow, and it's a pretty different scene on the north side of Waller Creek, where there's more of a woodland full of pecans and elms. There's a bur oak over there, and that comes down to there's differences there. One of them is the grade. It's steeper here and it's more level over there, and the other is the soil, which I like to geek out about. And over here on the south side, we're on this gravel deposit, and there's this really well-draining gravelly soil And over there, the soil that those pecan trees love is this rich clay. So we can start to put together why certain plants grow in certain places, and also what those places might have looked like prior to the development of these neighborhoods around here. So when we talk about the different trees growing in different parts of the property here, and what sort of soil they're growing in, what sort of plant communities come from what sort of soil, we're just talking about the first level of what builds into an ecology here in these natural spaces. So I really encourage you, whether you're coming here to explore the Ney or going somewhere else in Austin to explore a natural area, or even in your own neighborhood, to start to ask those questions about what sort of soil might be here, what sort of plant communities are in this soil, how might those plants feed different kinds of insects, and how might those insects feed different birds, and birds that are also eating berries and seeds, and the web just grows and grows, and it's part of what makes natural spaces so beautiful and so valuable, not only to wildlife but also to us.